And welcome back to Chicago Bulls Insider. Today we're talking about Coby White being listed as one of 5 players who will get the most attention at this upcoming NBA trade deadline this season. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button. Just like Modest Mazelis, slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. Make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about Coby White, listed as one of the top 5 NBA stars that will get all the attention at next year's trade deadline. And so if you've not got a chance to see this, you can go over to Bleacher Report and read about this. And so just to let you know, on this list, Coby White is coming in at number 5. You have Trey Jones on the list. You have LeBron James. You have Giannis. You have Jonathan Kuminga as well. And then you have Coby White on this list. And so this is what was said here. And so just paraphrasing this, and I think it becomes very interesting, especially when you go and you look at just what Coby White could be thinking about as he's heading into free agency, and just really how the Chicago Bulls have let this play out and perhaps maybe should have made a move much sooner. And so here's what it says. It says that the Bulls could be the team to offer him that much in unrestricted free agency, but unless White is really keen on winning a maximum of 44 games, why would he ever prioritize re-signing with the Chicago Bulls when he could aim higher elsewhere? And then lastly, this is where it becomes interesting when you think about the series of things which have got the Chicago Bulls and Coby White to this point. It says that Chicago probably should have dealt White at last year's deadline or even the one before. It was immediately evident that this was a bargain contract and was going to be small for a realistic extension, and the unrestricted free agency was nearly inevitable. All right. So, with that being said, and just kind of looking at this and thinking about it. So the first thing that, I really wonder about is, will Coby White seriously be one of the top 5 players that we're looking at the NBA trade deadline? Because I think that if we are looking at him as a top 5 player, I think that this is actually pretty good for the Chicago Bulls, because this would mean that Coby White is absolutely balling, which I think that he has a definite chance to do so this season. I do feel like that he's going to come into this season and really pick up where he left off last season. I think that a lot of these players that played in that offensive system last year are going to take off. And so, I could expect for Coby White and the numbers to go up. And I do think that there are going to be a lot of phone calls to the Chicago Bulls. Now, the question is, are the Chicago Bulls really going to pick up the phone and actually listen? So, we've talked about this before, where there was a report where, an executive that was anonymous came out and said that, look, they absolutely have turned down deals for Coby White, and that they love Coby White. And so we've seen this with AK. He said this numerous times. And so, I think that when you go back and you look at that Bleacher Report article where it says that the Bulls perhaps should have traded him last season, or, maybe even a couple seasons ago. And when they're talking about the bargain contract, they're talking about this extension rule, which I didn't read about that, but we've talked about this before, that ultimately they weren't going to be able to extend him, based off what he was going to do as far as just going out and just simply raising his value and just making it to where that extension just doesn't make sense. And so saying that the Bulls should have thought about this beforehand, and I'm like, it still could play out in the Bulls' favor, because if Coby White goes out, he's playing extremely well at the All-Star break, or not the All-Star break, but when he's playing well and you get to the trade deadline, I definitely think that there's still going to be options for him. And who's to say that the picks that could be out there for him, now are not better? Like, I think that there's the possibility that the picks could be a lot better than what you could have had last season or a season ago. And so, this is the game that you play when you're, kind of going out there and you have a possible trade asset, and you're just hoping that, it doesn't lose the value. And so I don't think that I'm betting on Coby White and his value going down. I think it more so goes up. but I'm not really a believer that they're going to move off of Coby White. I just don't see that. I mean, I think things could really change, but I think that with Coby White, I think with this front office, they are really trying to prove that, they did the right thing by keeping this backcourt together. And I also think that when you look at just the way this team wants to still remain competitive, it would make a lot of sense to keep Coby White here. And so that's why I don't necessarily buy into the fact that the Bulls are going to trade him like that. And, I think that they're probably going to be hesitant, I think, to trade Ayo Dosunmu as well, because I think that Ayo Dosunmu really is a guy that he may not necessarily step up in the scoring department this year, but I think defensively, what they're going to find with this team is that they really need him. And I think that he has a chance really now to show just how versatile of a defender he is, because I think that Ayo, he gives you that on-ball stuff. He's going to give you the off-ball stuff, and just his ability to generate offense and things like that. I'm not sure that you want to trade that away, especially when you're trying to build up this young team. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, do you think that Coby White should even be on this list? Because I do find it interesting that he's on the list with a guy like LeBron James, which I even find that interesting because with LeBron James and the thought of him being traded from the Lakers, I'm not necessarily buying that. And then with Giannis being on this list too, we had heard the noise after the season with Giannis, and maybe perhaps he would want to maybe want out of this thing. And I'm not sure that I'm necessarily buying that, especially when they made that move to get rid of Dame. And then you now bring in Miles Turner like that. I mean, that's a little bit more of an all-in type of move here. Let's see what the Bucks look like. And so, I could imagine that definitely, if both of those players won out, I think that they would command the most attention. And then with Trae Young, look, Trae Young and this Atlanta Hawks team, I think that they are going to be pretty dangerous with what they've added. And so, I'm not necessarily sold that they're going to want to move off of Trae Young like that. I know that they could, but, I think that Trae Young actually could click maybe with what they have going on here with Atlanta. And then with Jonathan Kuminga, like, I'm not even sure that Jonathan Kuminga is a guy that might be traded here, because the way things are trending with that situation, it looks like that he's going to sign the qualifying offer, and his qualifying offer is so low. I'm not sure, what the Golden State Warriors would really get out of that. I think that it would probably be a situation that he's more likely to get traded if he does that, 2+1 deal that we saw out there. But remember, he wants to put a no trade clause into that. And I will say this, out of the 5 players that are on this list, Coby White probably has, I'd say, the most clearest path to be traded, because I think that when you look at him in that situation there, like, I think that, with a contract is definitely something that you could get something done if you're the Chicago Bulls. That's number one. Number two, at this point in time, you don't need to necessarily, I think, give the Chicago Bulls, maybe, your entire future to get Coby White. I think that that would be another thing to this. And so I think that Coby White out of this list, he's probably the one that would be the most tradable. But you guys let me know in the comments. I'm not sold on this, not in the camp of necessarily going out and trading Coby White. I've said that countless times, but you guys let me know. And as we always say, look, go Bulls. And I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.